All cards for the new set, Wisdom of Sky and Sea, the Gen 2 set, have been revealed. Let's go over the EX cards and see if they're worth playing. First we have Kingdra EX, Stage 2, so if you're going to be playing this, you're almost certainly using a rare candy. 170 HP, very respectable, on the higher side of cards in the game. And we have 2 water energies for 90 damage. So on the face of it, before we get to the effect, that's a solid amount of damage, but it obviously doesn't stack up to some of the other Pokemon in the game. However, this Pokemon has an upside on their attack. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. We've seen this effect on a couple other cards, and it's always at least very annoying, and sometimes actually very good. So I think Kingdra at least has a chance of being playable. And I could even see it being pretty good, especially if you pair it with the other best water card in the meta right now, Greninja. The weakness, however, is pretty rough, considering how good Electric type is right now and how many new cards they're getting in the new set. Next we have Skarmory EX, basic Pokemon, 140 HP, 70 damage for 2 Steel Energy. So like Kingdra, the rate on this is not very efficient, but if the ability is good enough, then it might be worth playing. That ability is, during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes minus 20 damage from attacks. So damage mitigation like this, it can be sneakily good, but I'm getting the feeling that this might not be good enough alone. I know Steel is getting other support cards in this set, so maybe this could see some play, but in a vacuum, I think this might not be good enough. Next we have Crobat EX, also a Stage 2, so probably using Rare Candy, and 170 HP, again, very good. 1 energy for 70, so the rate on that is actually quite good. Of course, you are Stage 2, so you're never doing this on your very first turn. But the question then becomes, what are you doing with the energy you're saving? There are other cards in the game that have a similar rate at Stage 2, and they don't really see a lot of play. So the question then is the effect on this good enough, poisoning your opponent's Pokemon? And can the other cards in this deck support Crobat? Of course, there are other very good dark types in the meta right now, so I think this card has a chance. Next, we have Donphan EX. Stage 1, which means you don't need rare candies, giving you the option to put it in a deck with a different Stage 2 line that does use rare candies. 160 HP, so still good, pretty respectable. 1 energy for 50 damage on the face of it. So before we read the text, that's an okay rate, but we're expecting a lot here from the ability. If this Pokemon has at least 2 fighting energy attached to it, this attack does 60 more damage. So the question becomes, how does this fare in either mode? 1 energy for 50 damage? Not very impressive for a Stage 1 EX Pokemon. Or 3 energies for 110 damage. Honestly, still not very impressive. I do know that fighting is also getting some more support in this set, so maybe with other cards this could be playable, but I'm expecting to not see very much of this, especially with a huge retreat cost like that. Up next, Lantern EX. A very underrated Pokemon in my opinion. Another Stage 1 Pokemon, so again, pretty playable with another line of Pokemon that uses Rare Candy to get to their Stage 2 quickly. 150 HP, okay, but not super impressive. So 3 energies for 80 damage. Again, not very efficient. Let's see if the text on the attack makes up for it. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. If tails, your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Okay, so this is a pretty high upside. Our opponent's Pokemon is guaranteed to be either paralyzed or confused. While both of these are good, obviously there's still a little bit of variance here where if you hit tails and then your opponent hits heads, then you didn't get very much of an effect. It's also a little bit scary to have that 150 HP with a weakness to fighting energies, considering we have things like Rampardos that can one-shot it and is way more efficient. But overall, I think whether this card is good or not really hinges on if confusing your opponent's Pokemon as a consolation prize is good enough. Next, we have Shuckle EX. Okay, so cards like this I really am not a fan of. In this set, there are only 10 EX cards, and one is used on this. 120 HP, with an ability Solid Shell. This Pokemon takes minus 20 damage from attacks. So in general, this ability is not bad, but then the question becomes, what type of Pokemon is it stapled onto? And how much HP do they have to begin with to take advantage of this ability? So obviously, he does not have that much HP, which means this ability is nearly worthless, and his attack is just as annoying. 1 energy, triple slap, does 20 times something. So you flip 3 coins, this attack does 20 damage for each heads. Okay, so between 0 and 60 damage for 1 energy. Obviously, if this just read 1 energy do 60 damage, it'd be pretty good. However, if we just do the math here, on average, we're only getting 30 damage. And even if we're guaranteed 1 heads with the new Will card, our average is still only 40 damage. So really, it seems like this card's main purpose is to sometimes just snipe your opponent's basic Pokemon at the very beginning of the game, winning you the game immediately. Next, we're going to move to Blissey EX. So it should be said this is a promo card, which means it's not actually in the set, which is why we actually have 11 EX cards here instead of the normal 10 for the 2 pack sets. Stage 1, 180 HP, both of which are pretty good things. However, that's when the interesting stuff ends. Like most promo cards, it's not really playable. At 4 energies to only do 100 damage, with the 50% chance of healing you for 60. Maybe this card will see niche play in some interesting tier 2 decks, but that's about it. Okay, now let's go over the cards that were already spoiled. First we have Umbreon EX, and this is the card that most people are pretty hyped for. And I honestly think for good reason. Having a repeatable Cyrus is very good, and being only stage 1 obviously means that the whole package is only 2 cards. And the ability only costing 2 energy and doing respectable 80 damage means your fail case is pretty high. There's also not a lot of leaf Pokemon going around in the meta, so the weakness isn't really a downside right now. The only real downside I can see on this card is I think people are underestimating how much of a requirement this Pokemon being in the active spot is. Obviously you can use it, retreat, and then attack with something else, but having an attack that only does 80 damage sometimes won't get you over the line. Not to say this card is bad, I actually think it's quite good. And now Espeon. Again, same thing, stage 1, 140 HP, both solid. Let's just skip the ability for now and read the attack, 2 energies for 80 damage. Again, solid, but nothing game-breaking. Dark as a weakness is actually a real liability here, especially since this set is getting some pretty good Dark support, and Dark was already at a solid place in the meta. Now to the ability Psychic Healing. You get to heal 1 of your Pokemon for 30 if Espeon is in the active spot. Again, I think people are underestimating how much of a requirement this Pokemon needing to be in the active spot is. 30 is a pretty good amount, but I would say 40 is the minimum that you'd be happy with. Just healing for 30 is not a good enough reason to play this Pokemon, and nothing else on this card makes me want to play it. Okay, and now for the headliners, Ho-Oh and Lugia. Let's start with Ho-Oh. Basic Pokemon, 150 HP, both respectable. 3 energies for 80. So on the face of it, like I said earlier, 3 energies for 80 damage is not very efficient, which means we should expect a very good ability here. And that ability is take a fire, water, and electric energy from your energy zone and attach them to your benched basic Pokemon in any way you like. Okay, so first thing we have to think about is this card looks like it ramps, but you have to keep in mind that you also have to pay 3 energies for it. So really, you need to ramp this card first, and then it can ramp other cards. Which, to be fair, considering its ability uses colorless, it can use most of the ramp available to any color in the game. Also, weakness to lightning, which is a little bit of a liability in the meta right now. I could see this card being played a lot, just because even if it's a B+, it's very flexible and can enable a lot of interesting decks. There is definitely a restriction with the energy only being able to go on basic Pokemon, but there are tons of extremely good basic Pokemon in the meta right now. Last up, we have Lugia EX. Basic Pokemon, 150 HP, colorless technically, elemental blast, fire, water, electric, 180 damage. Obviously this one-shots almost every card in the game if you can pull it off. And it has the downside of discarding 3 energies from this Pokemon, 1 of each color required to use it. So I don't really see this card being played without Ho-Oh. I do think that the Ho-Oh Lugia deck could be real, especially if we find a good way to ramp Ho-Oh, because the payoff is definitely worth it. If you can attack twice with Ho-Oh, then you get 2 attacks with Lugia, which definitely makes it one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. But whether that'll really be viable or not is yet to be seen. Overall, I'm kind of surprised by the EX cards that we ended up getting. It's especially surprising that we didn't get an EX form of any of the Stage 2 starter Pokemon, or any of the legendary dogs, but I suppose they're saving those for the next set. The next video will be ranking every single card in the set, so look forward to that. And in the meantime, let me know what you thought of these cards in the comments.